Good morning again, everyone. My name is Greg. I didn't introduce myself earlier, but if you're new to Fairhaven, my name is Greg, one of the pastors here, and we're really glad that you're here. And we say this quite often around here, but this is a place that you can belong, even before you believe. A place where you can find a connection with people, where questions can be asked, and we are comfortable with that, and are really grateful that you're here this morning. I mentioned just a bit ago that we had 116 baptisms this past Sunday in Lake Michigan, plus another 10 that were here on Sunday morning with our infant baptisms. And I just want to share a little bit about that, because that number of baptisms actually has the ability to create a problem in this way. That we were out in the waters of Lake Michigan for just about 2 hours doing those baptisms. And it was fine for us because the water was like in the 70s and we're up to our waist and we were super comfortable. But those that are on the beach, it was like really hot and the sand was hot and it wasn't comfortable for them. And a couple years ago, we had the opposite that happened. The weather was beautiful, but the lake had turned and the water was like 56 out there and we were freezing. And it just takes a while to do that many baptisms, and here's why. And we started thinking about it, like, how do we do this in the future so that we're not there for 2 hours doing this? And we don't have the answer to it, but we do know that those 2 hours were incredible, because every one of those 116 people that got baptized had a story. And we had, I think it was 6 people last minute from Fairhaven just went, they called, came out, made a decision to come to the waters of baptism. Every one of those has a story. And we were able to stand in the water and circle up and listen to the story, like, what does baptism mean to you? And why are you here today? And to hear teenagers that are standing in the water with tears coming down their faces as they share what this meant to them, the decision that they made for Jesus Christ, to give their life to Christ, and to listen to one woman in particular, a young lady, tell that she was at a place where all the guilt that she felt and all the shame that she was feeling, like, I'm done with this. I'm just done with the guilt and shame, and I'm going to leave it right here. And I think that's the power of Christ, to eradicate guilt and to, therefore, now there is no, this is what Paul said, condemnation for those who are in Jesus Christ. And she came out of that water a different person. And not just her, but to think about the number of people that stood out there. And we had some young kids that were out there with their parents, and one mother in particular who, when we asked the question, like, what does this mean to you? She couldn't get the words out. She just stood there and couldn't speak because she was so overwhelmed to be able to stand there with a child and to be able to have this baptism. I think about Jeff, my friend Jeff, who left the church one Sunday morning around Easter and drove out feeling like I have to go forward and share with somebody what God's stirring in my heart from this message and this morning. And he drove all the way back to church and came, and he was looking for Lori, and Jeremy and I were here, and he's like, I guess you guys will do, that'll be all right. And so he shared with me his story, and as I listened to his story, we eventually ended up at a breakfast together, and we ate breakfast together, and then he made the decision to go for the waters of baptism. He came out in that water so fired up about his baptism, like so charged up about going into the waters one man and coming back a new man. I'm like, I think he might take me down in the waters with him. I'm about ready. Had I said 117, it's because I would have got baptized with him. Both of us going down together. And then I think about a woman in our church that came out with her husband and began to share a story and had a turn just recently, diagnosed with cancer, and she was here several weeks ago and her heart was being stirred about this thing called baptism. Then last week, she made the decision to go for the waters of baptism, and we're listening to her story and listening to what she's facing and saying, I know that God's with me and I know that he'll be with me. And we circled up around her and we prayed for her and prayed over her, and then we baptized her. And then this one, a little 3rd grader and a little 5th grader. Grandpa Jim is standing there. Their parents are standing there. I got a chance to share a little bit because I shared a lot as we sat with the family and their grandmother, Lori, had passed away, and we did the service right here, the funeral service. And then to listen to these children as they talked about their baptism and what it meant to them. They could barely get the words out. And these little children just crying and saying that Grandma had meant so much to them. And they didn't share a lot. Mom had to share a little bit for them, but that Grandma Lori had meant so much to them, had been so instrumental in their life, so impactful in terms of their faith, and they just longed that she could have been there to watch this. And I don't know. I mean, because here's the reality. I don't think we become like God when we die and become omnipresent and can see everything. But I wonder, and I wondered out loud with them, maybe in God's economy, maybe in God's goodness, maybe Jesus just opened up a moment right over top of their baptism and just said, Lori, as part of your reward, look at your grandchildren. See how much they love us. That's what we got to do. And this week, there's just been a song that has been stirring in me every time I think about this. And it's an old song that says, glory to his name, glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied, glory to his name. I'm not a singer, but I've been singing it all week long. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. And I wondered if you'll sing that with me this morning. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. Think those words through. Sing it one more time. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. God is so good. So good. So many stories of life transformation. And he didn't have to do it, but he did. For me, for you, for 116 more people. Father, we are so grateful that we get to see a move of you like this. Literally glory to your name, and honor to your name, and power and to your name, majesty to your name, full worth to your name for what you have done. Amen. You know, we're 5 weeks away from ending this series in the book of Genesis, and it seems kind of fast to me as we're almost at the end of this. Like, did it really go that fast? And the big question, when we think about only 5 more weeks after this before we complete our preaching study series all the way through the book of Genesis, the big question is, how is this thing going to end? Because quite frankly, up to now, it's been a hot mess, for real. If you think about Adam and Eve, we began there, and Adam and Eve, they reject God, they walk away from God, they end up outside of the garden, and then their children, Cain, takes a big rock, and Cain, he crushes the head of his brother. And then from there, we find Noah. He's found righteous before God, but what happens with Noah in his generation is God is grieved to his heart that he had even made humankind, sends a flood over the earth. And then after that, we have a story about Hagar and Ishmael. And Hagar and Ishmael, Hagar with her child Ishmael, it's Abram and Sarai. And Sarai has an encounter with Hagar, her maidservant, that is just so brutal, so hard, that she ends up running and taking her son runs away from God. It's a beautiful story in some ways, but so ugly in other ways. And then there's Jacob and Esau, and we see Jacob deceiving his father and stealing his brother's birthright, stealing his brother's inheritance. He steals from his brother. He deceives. And then it gets flipped on him because Jacob and Rachel and Leah, this story, so interesting because he then is the one that gets deceived. He goes into an agreement that he'll work for 7 years in order to get the one that he loves, Rachel, to be his wife. He wakes up in the morning on the night of his wedding, and he rolls over, if you will, into bed and says, "Good morning, Rachel," and goes, "Time out. This is Leah. Wrong sister. What just happened here?" And then has to work another 7 years to end up with Rachel. Incredible story. And then their child, they end up with a son named Joseph. And Rachel and Jacob end up with Joseph. Rachel has one son, and then Leah and Jacob end up with 6 sons. And Joseph is the favored one. Joseph is the one that gets the coat of many colors. He's the one that gets the fine linen. Joseph is the one, even though he's not the firstborn, he's firstborn of Rachel, he's in line to become the leader of the Beit Av, or the family, the house of his father. He's going to be in charge, get the double inheritance that would come with being the firstborn, even though he's not the firstborn. And he has a conversation about how my brothers are going to bow down to me and how you're going to bow down to me, Dad. And those 6 brothers aren't having it at all. They're not okay with it. And they end up taking him, ripping his robe off, throwing him into a pit, selling him off into slavery, removing him from the family 100%. So they think, how is this story actually going to end? And here's what happens to Joseph. Because he's sold off into slavery and then eventually finds himself in a pit called prison, and he's down there for 13 years. 13 years in prison in this other land, in the land of the Egyptians. And word comes to the Pharaoh because he's got a troubling dream. He doesn't know what to do with the dream, and so what he does is he pulls in the smartest men. He can find the smartest people that are in the community, says, "Come, interpret my dream. I've got these 7. What do I do with this stuff?" And everybody's like, don't know. And you don't want to speak wrongly to the Pharaoh, because that'll cost you 13 years in prison or worse, your head on a platter. And so he's not getting the interpretation. And there's a cupbearer that said, a couple years ago, I was down in prison, I had a dream, and I went to Joseph, and in a conversation with Joseph, this Hebrew guy, he actually gave me the interpretation of my dream. And I was remiss in not saying something when you were looking for an interpreter, but I think he could do it. And so he calls Joseph up, and Joseph comes up to interpret the dream, stands before the Pharaoh, and he shoots a shot on this one. He goes for it. Because when you have nothing to lose, you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to prove, you're a dangerous man. You'll do anything. And so he stands before the Pharaoh thinking, what are you going to do to me? What? You're going to throw me in prison? Been there for 13 years. Not worried about going to prison. You're going to take my life? All right. And the Pharaoh says, can you interpret my dream? No. But God can. And so fire away. And then he gives him the interpretation of his dream. And again, we can see this guy. He's a dangerous man, willing to say whatever to the Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world. I'll tell you what the interpretation of your dream is. It's this: 7 years of good. So far, so good. You want to speak good stuff to a man that has the power of life and death in his mouth. And then he says, but I'm going all the way. You're going to have 7 years of really bad famine. And then he tells him what to do. The man who isn't used to people telling him to do anything gets told by a guy that just came out of prison, you're going to have 7 good years, 7 bad years. This is what you need to do. And the king looks around the room and says, I brought the smartest people in our land in here. Are you smarter? Are you smarter? Anybody smarter than Joseph? How about you? You smarter than Joseph? Are you? You are. She's got her hand up right there. She's like, I'm smarter than Joseph. And here, what Joseph gets from the Pharaoh is a platform. He says to Joseph, come out of that pit. No more a prison for you. You've spent your last day there. I am going to make you second in command. Everybody in the land of Egypt is going to answer to you, and you will answer to just one, to me. You and I, we're going to run this place called Egypt. It's where we pick up our story here today in the book of Genesis. We're in chapter 41, verses 41 through 47. Genesis chapter 41, 41 through 47. And let's read together. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. Interesting. Remind you of anything else in the Bible? Put the ring on his finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and the people shouted before him, make way! Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephaniah-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. This story is masterful. It really is. And it's masterful for so many reasons, but this in particular, for me, as I read it, I went, this story is so redemptive. This thing comes full circle. This story has a connection. Like the author of this is magnificent to tie these two together, inspired by God to write this stuff, because I love redemptive stories when you can think about your life being used by God in a way that you could have never predicted when you were going through something. I was having a conversation just recently with a friend of mine whose ministry now, his ministry is to reach out to people that are going through the very same thing that disqualified him at one time in his life. That he had lived in such a fashion that he wasn't able to do ministry for a season. And God restored that and said, that's the very thing. Now we're going to use that. It's the scripture verse that says, in all things, not good things only, in all things, not just calamity that happens, in all things. Even when we make a mess out of it, God is working good. He's in the middle of all of that stuff, working for the good, because he's God, and that's what he does. He goes in to restore and to redeem and to heal and to reset. And that guy's ministry, full circle, is now to reach the kind of people that are doing the sorts of things that he himself was. Here, this story comes full circle, and we can see it. Joseph, this story that we just read, is reminiscent of the story of Joseph that we read several weeks ago when we were in chapter 37, chapter 39. I wonder if you caught it when we were reading it. I paused for a minute, went, what about the ring? What about the robe? What's going on in this story? Because here's the story. Joseph at one point went to his father and he said to his dad, I had a dream. Yeah? Said Jacob, what's your dream? I had a dream that all 6 of my brothers are going to bow down to me. What? And not just them, you're going to bow down to me too, Dad. You're getting a little too big for your britches, boys. And what he said to him, he rebuked him, harshly rebuked him for the arrogance of that, harshly rebuked him, then sent him to the field to go find his brothers. What happened when he found his brothers? His brothers, here comes the dreamer, here comes the one that we're not cool with, and they ripped his robe off him. They threw him into a pit, and then they removed him from the family. We got to get rid of this guy. And one of them is like, well, don't kill him. Here's some people coming. Let's sell him into slavery. And he ends up in Egypt, ends up in prison. And we can see a retelling of what we read in verse and what we just read this moment ago. We can see in 37 and 39 this story of Joseph getting played out again. And pay attention, here it is right here. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. What is going on there? He dressed him in robes of fine linen. What? He's got a robe back? Put a gold chain around his neck. The one who was destined, because he was Rachel's firstborn, to be the leader of the Beit Av, to be the leader of the family, to be the leader of his father's house, to get the double inheritance. Now, he's back in power again. Ride in the chariot as my second in command. I can do better than that. Here's the parallels in the story. The parallel is this, that the brothers at one point took his coat of fine linen, and Pharaoh gave him a coat of fine linen. The brothers threw him into a pit, and Pharaoh pulled him up out of prison, pulled him up to have a conversation, and said, you are not going to be in the pit anymore. The brothers said, we got to get this cat out of our family. Let's remove him from our family. We'll go back and lie to Dad. We'll take the coat back. Tell him he was eaten by wild animals. He's gone once and for all. And Pharaoh says, I'm going to put the family ring on you. Where else do we see that story of the family ring? It's Luke chapter 15. It's a story of that Jesus told. There was a son, and he rejected his father, and he left the family. He wandered off in squanderous living and scandalous living. And as he was wandering around, eventually he came to his senses because he was to starve to death and thought, my only hope is to go back home to Dad, but there's no way Dad is going to accept me as part of his family anymore. I rejected Dad. I will be the rejected one. And he made his way back home with a rehearsed speech. Just make me a servant, please. Can I just serve in your household? Because even your servants are doing better than me. I don't have to be your son. I don't have to be in line for the inheritance. And the father doesn't even listen to him. He grabs the family ring, puts it back on. You're part of the family. He grabs the robe and puts it on him, kills the fatted calf and says, this son of mine that was dead, he is alive again. And he celebrates and he says, that's the heart of God. What's going on here? The brothers say, you're no longer part of the family. Pharaoh says, you can be part of my family. I want to make you part of my family. The brothers removed him from any position of power. You're gone. And what does Pharaoh do? I'm going to make you the most powerful man in this entire land. Save me. It is a tale of two families that we have going on in this story. And which family will he belong to? The one he was born into, or the one that he was accepted into? It's kind of a tale of two dads. Will it be Jacob, or will it be Pharaoh? Will it be your biological father, or will it be this father, if you will, that is now saying, come now, my son. I put my family ring on you. I put the robe. I put the gold chain on you. You have been given all this. You're mine. So Jacob or Pharaoh? This dad or that dad? What will it be? What's his identity going to get wrapped up into? Or maybe, because I don't think we're real creative sometimes, our culture isn't real creative, and sometimes it lends to us getting sucked into the culture, thinking it's only this or that. There's only two ways. You either go for this or you go for that, and that's the only options. If you're not for this, then you must be for that. And if you're for this, then you're against that. And I just don't buy that way of thinking. I think there's far more creative ways to think. Is it Jacob or is it Pharaoh, or is there some creative third, beautiful, magnificent, mysterious third option that's here? I actually think it's the third option. Joseph said there's 7 years of plenty that are coming. 7 years of plenty came. Then he said there's 7 years of famine that are on the way. And we're about to read about those 7 years of famine because the brothers eventually show up. And when they show up, they don't recognize the brother. The brothers come because the famine's so severe. They heard there's food in Egypt because he lived in such a way that he prepped. Joseph lived in such a way that he prepped for the 7 years of famine. And when the brothers show up, they're like, we don't even recognize, like, their own brother. Like, how is that possible? It's their flesh and blood. I mean, like, how can't you recognize your flesh and blood? Like, really? Because I know I look exactly like I did back in high school, hands down. Totally do. I mean, look at that. You see the resemblance? Here, I'll take my glasses off. Now you see it? Now you got it, right? But here, we read this. Maybe this is why. Maybe it's the years that happened to it, but maybe it's this. When he was pulled up out of the pit, when he was brought before the Pharaoh, when the cupbearer said, hey, there's a guy that can interpret dreams. This is what Joseph did coming out of prison after 13 years. He shaved and changed his clothes, and he came before the Pharaoh. Then he got before the Pharaoh. He got put on a ring. He got put on a robe. He was given gold chain. When the brothers showed up, Hebrew men don't shave, especially the tassels on the side. You don't shave. He's clean shaven. And when you change into clothes, if you're in Egypt, guess what you're going to wear? You're going to wear the clothes of Egyptians. He's dressed in the fine linens of the Egyptian. He's got the signet ring of the Pharaoh on his hand. He's got the gold chains. The brothers show up and they go, he looks like an Egyptian. They appear to be looking at an Egyptian, not their brother. No wonder. And so whose family was he? I mean, he looked like an Egyptian. He dressed like an Egyptian, likely spoke like an Egyptian. Is he Pharaoh's or is he Joseph's or Jacob's? And in this case, the creative option here is not, I'm Jacob's. It is not, I'm Pharaoh's. It's, I belong to a different father. Because when I was abandoned, that's why I love this story. More than any story that we've been in, it is so redemptive and so powerful and so beautiful. And it's so real to the experience of so many. Because if you live in this world, Jesus said you will have troubles. Me too. But take heart. Take heart. I've overcome all of this. I'm with you. When he was abandoned, when he was tossed into the pit, when he was sold off, when he was framed and thrown into prison for 13 years, somewhere in that, there's no way, somewhere in that journey, no way this didn't happen. He had such an encounter with God and an experience with God that it was absolutely down to the core of who he was, real. That God was real to him, so much so that when he had a chance to get out of prison, and the Pharaoh looked at him and said, can you interpret my dream? He said, no, I can't interpret your dream. Nope, I don't have any ability to do that. But there is a God. There's a God that can. Throw me your dream and watch what he can do. And this man with nothing to lose and nothing to hide and nothing to prove gave the whole story of it. He gave the dream to the Pharaoh, but he gave credit to God. I think Joseph just never lost sight of the fact that I have a biological father. That's not my identity. I have another Pharaoh that has treated me like a son of his own. That's not my identity. Because I had one that never left me. Even when I was in the deepest pit, he was always with me. And that God is my true Father. That's my true Father. And that, I wish I could have taken every single one of you out into the water. There's too many of us to hear the stories in the same way, but to hear the stories of people saying that again and again and again, and why it means so much to me is this. Because there was a point in my life, and someday I've been thinking about this. Someday I just need to sit down and just tell, maybe Jeremy and I do this, maybe Lori, Jeremy, and we just tell our stories, tell you all of it. And that's a cleaned up picture. I got some better ones. You look and go, whoa, that's Pastor Greg. And they're like, nope, that was Greg prior to even following Jesus. But when you become the recipient, like I have been, of a scandalous grace, a way over the top grace, you cannot help but dispensing it. It's what my friend and I were talking about. He said, what are you preaching tomorrow? I said, the same thing I always preach. I got one message and about 1,000 ways to tell it. It's all about Jesus. It's about what he did and what he can do and who he is to us. This is where Joseph's identity was anchored. It's why this story is so beautiful. And so I got an email a day or two after the baptisms, and I read through the email in my office and just cried because it was so beautiful. And I reached out immediately and just said, can I please share some of this with the rest of the church? It is too powerful not to share, and I'll scrub some of the detail in it so they won't be able to figure out who it is. And the response came back almost immediately. No need to scrub the detail. It's other people's stories that have helped me live into my own story, and so let the story go. Her name's Colleen. And I'm going to invite the band to come up and as I share this story. So she writes this, and I'm just going to read it to you. First and foremost, thank you and the entire staff of Fairhaven. Let me expand that. Because when I think about staff, I think it's too small a thing. When I think about us, we're the church. You are the ministers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. You are those whom the mission of this church to help people find their way back to God, and the way we live and the way we act and how we move among each other, all of this and in the world. So she says, first and foremost, thank you and the entire staff, and I say thank you, Fairhaven, for a memorable Sunday for my family and I. In the water, you asked what brought me to the waters of baptism, and I have to be honest, I was so overwhelmed I couldn't complete a sentence. It was incredible to watch my children be baptized, and I know I was so proud that I didn't even let it sink in what this meant for me. I said that my husband, Andy, saved my life, and I know what she meant. As she said it, I knew what she meant because she had described how Andy had been so instrumental in helping her find Jesus. And then she wrote this. I meant that Andy is the person that introduced me to what a relationship in Christ is like. I grew up Catholic and I was baptized and confirmed because that is what everyone did, not because I necessarily believed it. Meeting Andy and his family, everything changed. I saw what a family and a marriage centered on Christ could look like, and I wanted that so much. It's such a beautiful story. And then I read this. Andy and I met in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm like, yep, I'm done reading this story. That's over. I'm out. She actually sent me, she said, you have to give the Buckeyes a shout out. And I'm like, I'll shout at them. I'm not shouting out for them. I'm not doing it. And then she went on to say we're a house divided, and I went, okay, I'm back. This is a beautiful story. She said, when I met him, I was not in a good place spiritually, mentally, or emotionally. I was focused solely on my career as I thought being successful in my job would make me happy. I've struggled with anxiety, and I vividly remember praying each and every night that my anxiety would go away. I started attending a church in Columbus. As my relationship with Christ grew, my anxiety began to lessen. I can now see that my anxiety drove me to God, and He used it to show me how much I needed Him. Fast forward to 2021, and I started to learn that God doesn't, in fact, speak to me. Andy and I moved back to Hudsonville, and to be honest, moving back to Hudsonville was intimidating for me because it seems like everyone has some form of Christian education or they're somehow experts in the Bible, while I was newer to my faith journey, and I tried several churches but never felt at home. We attended Fairhaven for my nephew's baptism, and on that very first Sunday, Andy and I knew that this was the church for us. I'm pretty sure you were preaching that day, Jeremy. You must have been you. But shortly after, I decided to volunteer in Harbor Kids Ministry, and it's been about 2 years now. I'm so grateful for Becky Lovins. She's on staff with us. And her kindness. When I met her before baptism, she said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, God can use me just as I am, because that is exactly how God uses every one of us, just as you are. I don't need to be an eloquent Christian who knows everything, but God knows my heart. And He knows how much I love serving the children in the ministry here. And that's more than enough. It is so humbling and so true and so beautiful. And so thank you. And I just want to say thank you to you too. Thank you for being a welcoming church that embraces all believers. This staff, these people are so incredible and so genuine, and I'm happy to call Fairhaven our home. At one baptism, my kids witnessed a church that surrounds them and loves an imperfect mother and a father who have dedicated their lives to a perfect Father. I got to leave my anxiety and my shame right there in that water, knowing this, that Jesus loves me, not because of what I did or because of what I do, but because of who He is. It's because of what He did for not just me, but all of us. That's the foundation of our family. And baptism gave me the opportunity to outwardly demonstrate my love and my commitment to Christ. And doing it with my kids just made it so much sweeter. Sing with me. Glory to His name. Glory to His name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to His name. Enough of me, Mac. Let's stand and sing that together. Glory to His name. Glory to His name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to His name. Not just with your lips now, straight from your heart. Let Jesus have this. Glory to His name. Glory to His name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory